Oh, that feels good. Oh man, where's the prop wash? Just dive in there. Oh, okay. It's the best thing I've flown in a long time. That's really good. That's really good. Why is it good? You know how old people stereotypically say things like, "Back in my day, bread cost a nickel." Well, that's kind of how I feel right now, because once upon a time, not that long ago, you could buy a really damn good 5-inch bind-and-fly quadcopter for about $200. This is the iFlight Sedora. And then along came the iFlight Nazgul, which was the replacement for the Sedora. And I still don't quite know the difference between them. And it was about $200 and it was pretty damn good. And then came the Diatone Roma. You tired of hearing Grandpa go on and on about how good things were in the old days yet, kids? Because this is the Diatone Roma F5 V2 and it is $270. And no, it doesn't have $70 more awesomeness. It's really close to the Diatone Roma F5 V1 in terms of its specs and capabilities. It should be a $200-ish quad, and the reason it's not is because it's 2021 and there's a global semiconductor shortage and a ship is blocking the Suez Canal and everything is expensive. So $270 is apparently the new normal for a budget bind-and-fly, quote-unquote, budget. And that's why iFlight is doing something really gutsy. Because this is the iFlight Nazgul Evoque, and it's $300-ish. It's even more expensive than the very, very good Diatone Roma F5 V2. So here's what we're going to do in this video. We are going to dig into both the analog and the digital version, thanks iFlight, of the Nazgul Evoque. And we're going to see just what iFlight thinks a $300 quadcopter should look like in this day and age. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. The iFlight Nazgul Evoque that you see me reviewing in this video was sent to me by iFlight. I did not purchase it with my own money. I have not received any cash or other forms of compensation in exchange for this video, and no one has had any approval or preconditions on the contents of this video. And most of the time I do not do unboxings on camera, but oh my goodness, iFlight has done such a damn good job with the packaging on this guy. I thought it was worth showing it off. It's such a nice unboxing experience, but more fundamentally, oh, look at that. They got these plastic screws so the props come out. Really, really slick. More fundamentally to the aesthetics, they have tried to make sure that a first-time user is going to have a good experience, and I sure do appreciate that. We need first-time users having as good an experience as possible. So, for example, they've got these stickers on the motors showing which direction the motors go and which direction the prop should spin. We've got the clockwise and the counterclockwise props all together on a spool, and they are on the correct side of the box so that they will go on, and hopefully people will get it right. Good job, iFlight. Now this quadcopter has a Crossfire receiver pre-installed. You can buy them that way. You can also buy them in a plug-and-play version where you install your own receiver, various other options. And nice to see that they have put this sticker on the bottom indicating where the bind button is for the Crossfire receiver. They've kind of buried it up in there so it might not be easy to get at. It's super cool that they've done that. The Evoque also comes with some documentation. There's a sticker pack. That's cute. Safe flight and be responsible. doing their part. Here's the manual for the Caddx Vista if you got the DJI version, and some Betaflight GPS rescue setup parameters. This one does have GPS on it. And it looks like they are shipping it with the GPS installed, but GPS rescue turned off, because GPS rescue on Betaflight, you kind of got to know what you're doing to set it up and enable it, and it doesn't always work. Like if you're used to like DJI drones, GPS rescue is not going to be that simple and reliable. So it's there if you want to turn it on, but you got to turn it on yourself. Fair enough. In order to really appreciate the Nazgul Evoque, we got to plug a battery in. And before we do that, we're going to go ahead and plug in the video transmitter antenna. Never power up a video transmitter without the antenna installed. Analog transmitters can actually be damaged. DJI transmitters probably won't be damaged, but still not a great idea. Why are the lights off, you're wondering? Oh, this thing's got LEDs, baby. Not just LEDs either. The LEDs are actually on the inside of the frame, and they've got these, I guess you would call them light pipes. I mean, I don't know what the actual term for them is. And not only are they on the side of the frame, but they're actually molded into the carbon fiber arms. There's a channel cut out here. So it's pretty badass. But the side plates on the Evoque aren't just good looking, they're functional. This is injection molded plastic, and it's designed to protect the internals of the Evoque from the kind of stuff you get up to when you're freestyling. At the very least, you hope it would help keep the insides clean, if not like protect it from, I don't know, getting stabbed by a branch or something. The Evoque comes with iFlight's Zing 2 motors, and long story short, the Zing 2 are some of the best motors on the market. They have a unibell, which is a single piece bell, so there's no seam between the sidewall and the top to come apart like some motors do. They have 7075 aluminum, which is a harder alloy of aluminum, which makes the motors more durable. They even have a shock absorbing bushing up here between the bell and the top bearing, which helps protect the bearing from damage. They're very, very good motors. And for iFlight to sell these motors, they typically sell them in about the $22 price range. It makes any $26 or $27 motor that somebody else is trying to sell really have to justify its price. This is moment of truth. 418 grams, and let's just put some props on top here. 435 grams. It's respectable. We'll put a battery. This is a 6S 1000 milliamp hour battery. 619 grams. Hold on. And with a GoPro Hero 8. 740 grams. I really thought from holding it in my hand that it was going to be heavier than that. That is a completely respectable weight for a 5-inch freestyle quad. There's no battery in the GoPro. 765. Okay, that's so now it's kind of right in the middle. Not surprisingly light, but not heavy either. Now, the big question that I think we have to ask is, how does that compare to the Diatone? Yeah, the Diatone's lighter by about 30-35 grams. That's not the end of the world on a 5-inch quad, but it probably is a difference you'll notice when you fly if you're really paying attention. Man, the Evoque frame is chonky too. I'm actually I can see where the extra 30-35 grams, whatever, compared to the Diatone went. This looks like 3 millimeter. It's all sandwiched in there, so I'm not going to be able to get a caliper on it. That looks like 3 millimeter carbon. That's impressive. A lot of times that would be 2 millimeter or 2.5 millimeter on a quad like this. It's going to have increased durability. The arm coupling method looks like it's the same as on the Sedora and the Nazgul. You've got these 3 bolts here, and it slides in. It's 2 bolts. Yeah, I think it's going to be 2 bolts to change an arm. I don't know how those arm screws go through the flight stack, so let's open up the top of it and take a closer look. Oh, nice. That's blue Loctite. There's blue Loctite on these screws. That is a nice touch. Oh, I can feel it dragging as I pull them out. That is a nice touch, iFlight. Like, no one would care if you didn't Loctite these screws. Except sometimes then the screws would fall out and people would crash or lose their quad or damage things. Yes, they all have blue Loctite on them. That's amazing. The screws for the GoPro mount have a washer built in. It's not a separate washer, it's built into the head. It's a separate screw. That is a great touch because a lot of times TPU 3D prints, they're flexible and they'll just rip right out of the screw head, won't hold it. So I always put little M3 washers. Just go to Amazon or wherever and just search for M3 washers. You can buy 100 of them for a couple bucks. They've integrated that. It's really thoughtful. So let's take a look on the inside and see what we've got. Very compact in here. So there's a flight controller. It is a 20mm flight controller. Holy crap. How about that? So do these side plates just lift right off? Is that how it works? Here I unintentionally am demonstrating the pro and the con of these side plates, because all I want to do is get this flight controller out of here and take a look at the ESC. And if I didn't have these side plates, that would be relatively easy to do. But because the side plates are all integrated, I can't really get in there. I have to just take the whole thing apart to work on it. Whereas on a more traditional frame, you would just basically take the top plate off, boom, and you'd be done. Oh, I see. That's the plugs for the LEDs. Well, that's nice that they've made plugs there. That's good. Oh, look at that. We have a little plug for the USB, too, to keep the USB from getting gunked up. That's nice. Yeah. So these are the FETs, the MOSFETs on the ESC, and I wanted to know the size of the MOSFETs here. These are, I don't know what the actual sort of voltage or amp rating is, but these are the smaller MOSFETs that you tend to find on 20mm ESCs. The fact that this is a 20mm ESC, I am well on record as saying that I'm not happy with most 20mm ESCs on full-size 5-inch quads, especially on 6S. They just tend to die. Ooh. Shards of plastic flying from the tips. Okay. I mean, it still seems to work. So it's only, you know, that's not like the most scientific testing in the world either, but at least I gave it a try. It did not immediately self-destruct on some tough turtle moding. Take it for what you will. The flight controller on the Evoque is really full-featured, especially for a 20mm flight controller. It is an F7 processor, so it has all the capabilities that Betaflight could offer both today and in the foreseeable future, if not forever. It's got lots of UARTs and other stuff broken out, like 5 full UARTs. Look at the specs. It's got a bunch of them. The way it accomplishes that, though, is by making the pads ultra tiny, and they don't have labels on the pads. So you will be looking at iFlight's documentation if you want to modify this or add to this in any way. Worth pointing out, iFlight has incredibly good documentation for all of their stuff. There is a Google Drive link that they have, which has manuals, wiring diagrams, CLI dumps, and a whole bunch of other information about all their products. And I'll put a link to that in the video description if you want to check it out. And with the battery mounted, you can see another clever thing they've done is they've mounted the XT60. It's permanently installed here with 2 screws holding it in. This is a 3D printed piece here and an injection molded piece here, sort of working together. And the idea is that will make sure that your battery strap, sorry about that, stays well out of the way of your props. That there's just no way it can kind of end up in the props there. The downside of this method, and I've seen this done various ways in the past, the downside is that if the battery ejects in a crash, it can damage this connector itself, the XT60 here. It can get ripped off and damage the pins. Now, it is fairly well secured, and I think the odds of that happening are lower than some of the other ways I've seen this done, especially if you use 2 battery straps and don't let your battery eject in a crash. This is really clever. Now, the Evoque can be purchased with a GPS on board, and mine have been shipped with that. I don't think you should do that. I wouldn't encourage you to do that. I have to say, the iFlight GPS unit that's on here is one of the better ones that we see in FPV. It's not as good as like the one that's in your cell phone or the one that's in a DJI quad, which pull in like 27 satellites. These ones pull in enough satellites to get the job done, but the iFlight is better than like the Bention cheapo GPSs that a lot of people are using. That being said, it's not great. None of them are great. And Betaflight's GPS rescue functionality is not reliable. It works some of the time. And if the alternative was that you were going to lose your quad entirely and GPS rescue saves you, that's great. But Betaflight's GPS rescue is not a full-fledged return to home. You wouldn't just be like, I guess I'm just going to let it fly home. You would never do it intentionally unless you were about to lose your quad, and this was the only chance you had of saving you. GPS is nice for things like, how far away from home am I? Or, I'm a little bit lost. Which direction is home? Or, how fast am I going? GPS speed is really useful. Or, what's my altitude? It's not great for altitude, GPS isn't, but I wouldn't count on it for GPS rescue, and I definitely wouldn't count on it if you're thinking it's going to be like a DJI quad where it'll just loiter or hover or return home. Real quick, let's just test the video transmitter with our Immersion RC power meter. As I've said before, the Immersion RC power meter is not as accurate as a thousands of dollars lab piece of equipment, but it is accurate enough to give us a rough idea of whether the video transmitter is in the ballpark of its stated values. And it basically is. At 600 milliwatts, it puts out close to 600 milliwatts, 540 milliwatts or something. Remember, it's not perfectly accurate. At 400 milliwatts, it's at about 360. At 200 milliwatts, it's at about 210. And at 25 milliwatts, it is at about 25 milliwatts. So the video transmitter essentially checks out. Before we go out and fly, let's take a look at the Betaflight configuration and see if there's anything interesting, either good or that I would change before I fly. And we will start in the configuration tab. They do ship with props out rotation, which a lot of people feel flies better and bounces off of obstacles better. The downside of props out rotation is that it throws dirt into your electronics, but on the Evoque, that's not going to be an issue because we've got these sidewalls protecting it from dirt getting in. So that's good. We're running D-Shot 600, which is what we would expect, and bidirectional D-Shot is enabled. It's interesting, they've raised the motor idle from the default of 5.5% to 7% to give maybe a little more low throttle stability. Probably they know what they're doing there. It's a small change, probably not going to make a huge difference compared to the defaults. I love that they're shipping with the maximum arm angle set to 180 degrees so that the quadcopter will arm even if it's not perfectly flat. That's a basic safety protection to prevent arming, like if you've got it, if you're cradling it in your arms or carrying it back from flight. But it also is annoying if the quadcopter is like set on a rock or something and it's not level, and then it won't arm. So I always disable that, and I approve of them doing it too. It's super annoying that the beeps happen even when I'm plugged into USB. I'm going to turn off this USB option, and that should mean that when we're plugged into USB, the beeper doesn't beep. It's great that they're shipping it with a beeper on board, like an actual nice loud beeper, to help us find the quad when we lose it, like after a crash. Nice. Saves us all this beeping on the bench. Don't like that. Now here in the Modes tab, iFlight doesn't seem to ship these quads with very many modes configured at all. No turtle mode, no beeper, no buzzer mode, nothing. And I guess the thinking is that as a beginner, you need as little to think about as possible, and they're trying to make sure these are safe to use for people who are just getting into the hobby. And then if you're not a beginner, you probably know how to set it up. Now, one thing they do that will catch you out is they ship it with angle mode permanently enabled. The idea being that a beginner is going to expect this to fly kind of like a DJI drone and not like a freestyle drone. And you need to explicitly disable that if you are going to, want that. So we're going to take that and we're just going to, we'll have to pick a switch, and we'll pick a switch position. But as long as this is all the way across the channel, angle mode is always going to be enabled. Personally, I like to set up my aux modes in a specific way that lets me have all my aux channels, all my aux modes on one channel. You see these are all using aux 1. It's a fairly advanced thing, and if it's your first time out, I'll put a video down in the video description about how to set up basic aux modes, but I'll also put a link to this video that shows how to do all your aux modes on one channel, and then you save your other channels for, you know, whatever else you might want to do. Before we do a flight test on this guy, there's a test we have to do first, and it's the GPS lock time. And the reason we have to do that first is the very first time a GPS powers up in a new location, or if it's been a few days since the last time it powered up, it has to download some information from the GPS satellites, and that means the very first lock takes longer. So I'm going to plug this guy in and set it down, and we're going to see how long it takes to download its initial GPS fix. No satellites locked, and the fact that the ESCs are beeping right now means it's been about 10 minutes since that's the default timeout in BL Heli. Well, let's see if the DJI quad does any better with a GPS lock. 9 satellites! 9 satellites! I have 9 sats. That's pretty good, actually. All right, let's fly this guy. And we know the weight of the quad, and we know the iFlight Zing 2 motors are good motors and how powerful they are. We should expect that this will fly pretty good. I am trying it out on the actual rates that they ship with instead of my normal rates, so it may take me a minute to get used to the rates. Let's do a little punch out here. It gets up. This is not the most powerful punchy thing I've ever seen. It does ship with, oh, there was no prop wash there. That's impressive. The camera feels like it is very wide angle. I'm having a little bit of trouble with depth perception on the camera, which to me I interpret as being wider angle than I'm used to. No, the camera feels like it is really fisheyed. I don't know what the FOV spec is, but it feels really weirdly fisheyed to me. I will get used to it, but ooh, it is hard to judge distance. That's very difficult to get used to. The handling is very good. We're getting like very little prop wash oscillation. Watch this. We're gonna drop in here, and you heard just a tiny little there, just the tiniest bit, but I don't think you could see it. It's quite good. The PID tune is quite good. Wow, motors sound real smooth. Well, let's see how the DJI one flies. And I mean, honestly, it's the same exact quad, just heavier, isn't it? And with a little more latency. So I'm not sure I should expect much difference, but the additional weight is going to make some difference. Wow, 11 satellites. That's pretty good for a frickin' Betaflight quad. 12 satellites, holy mackerel. Boy, I can feel that weight. And I feel like I can feel that latency. Caddx Polar is... Oh, yeah. Oh. Wow. Where you fly the analog and the DJI back-to-back. Especially with the Caddx Polar, which only supports 120 FPS, supports 60 FPS mode. The latency, 32 milliseconds. I don't know. I can fly it, but it just doesn't feel as good. It's not that heavy. It's not that light either. 760 grams is mid-range and not like super impressive. 725, 700, getting down closer to 700 is better flying and has more of that nimbleness. I ain't even lying. We going back to analog. We're going to try and get something done. It takes off. Is the up tilt different? It's the weight. It's got to be the weight. It's faster. The up tilt must be different. Come on, baby, reach for it. No, it's not faster. It's the field of view. We go into a fisheye lens. Makes things look faster. That's a fact. So that's why it feels faster. But it takes off lower in the throttle. Even that, whatever, 40 grams or whatever the difference was. I don't remember. It makes a freaking difference. Jeesh. Jeesh. In the ability to get up. But it just feels... See? You ain't gonna do that with DJI, baby. Not with a Caddx Polar, anyway. Got a little break up there. It's a little difficult to see what I'm doing. Where am I going? Where am I going? We're good, we're good, we're good. Son! It's real hard to judge distance, though, with this lens. I'll tell you what. That's good. That's good. That's good. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question: should you buy it? Let's start with the specs of these guys. And we got the analog and the digital, and then we got the analog one. There's a digital version of the Roma, but I don't have it. And they're very, very similar in specs. They all have an F7 flight controller. They do not have identical flight controllers, but in most of the ways that are going to matter to you, they are the same. They all have BL-Heli-32 ESCs. The Diatone has a 50 amp. These have 45 amp. Who cares? They're both the same. A big difference is that these guys, the iFlights, have 20 millimeter flight controllers and ESCs, whereas the Diatone has a full-size 30 millimeter one. In theory, that could increase the durability. However, that has a lot to do with the design and manufacturing, and so it's not a given. But I would have to put that, for me personally, as a mark against the iFlights. The Diatone also has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You can use your cell phone app, your SpeedyBee app, to configure it in the field without ever plugging in USB. And that is kind of cool, although maybe that's not something that you feel strongly about. And going with the analog version, the iFlight maxes out at 600 milliwatts. The Diatone goes up to 1 full watt. That's a big difference. That is, if it was 800 versus 1,000, I'd be like, who cares? But the difference between 600 milliwatts and a watt in terms of penetration and range is going to be noticeable, especially if you're flying somewhere with a lot of obstacles, like a concrete bando or something. So the win goes to the Diatone there. The reason the price difference is bigger than it seems goes back to the GPS. iFlight charges you $30 extra to put a GPS on this unit, whereas Diatone includes it for free. Although I have to point out, you'll notice that mine is not on here, and the reason is that it ripped off in a crash, and I don't have it anymore. So, whereas I have to mention that iFlight very intelligently puts a full M2 standoff through here to help make sure it stays connected. As opposed to, however Diatone did it, where it just ripped off. So if you do get it installed, hopefully it'll stay there. But $30, that's a lot. I mean, it's a good GPS unit, and for the most part it works, although it has to be acknowledged that on one of mine it didn't get any sats at all, and on the other it did a really good job. But if you're going for GPS, you're going to pay a lot more for the iFlight compared to the Roma. What else have we got? I think those are the main differences. Not the only differences, but the most substantial ones. So then, the Diatone Roma comes in at $270. The iFlights come in at $300. That is the plug-and-play version without any receiver. If you get a receiver pre-installed, it's going to cost more. So the savings for the Diatone Roma F5V2 are between $30 and $60, depending on if you order the GPS with the iFlight. And for a lot of people, that's going to be the answer. The Diatone Roma flies well, it's reasonably durable, it's reasonably full-featured, and it's $30 cheaper than the Evoque. But I have to say, holy crap, the analog version of the Evoque flew remarkably well. And I don't know whether that's weight, whether that's latency, whether it's something about the motors. Honestly, these are the Zing 2 Pro motors. I don't know, because like the weight difference between these guys it's not that big of a difference. It flew so well. Most of the time when I fly a quadcopter, I'm like, yeah, it's not bad. It's okay. For something to really wow me like this did was really notable. And frankly, the DJI version didn't really wow me. And again, I'm not 100% sure why. It'd be interesting to put an extra weight on this to see if that changes how it flies. So I would say if you're leaning toward the analog version, this was an amazing, amazing experience. Outstanding. And for me, well worth the $30 upgrade to the Diatone Roma F5 V2. If I could figure out what the difference was it the tuning? Was it the props? You might could make this fly a little better, but if you just want something out of the box, this was incredible. As far as the DJI version goes, I think we are kind of back to the original conclusion that I anticipated at the beginning of the video, which is that it's a little more expensive, and it's not that it's not worth the difference. It's good, but like you're paying for things like the cosmetics, the custom molded XT60 connector. In terms of how the quadcopter, just the raw flight experience, I think the less expensive Diatone Roma F5 V2 is going to be very compelling for a lot of people. But if you like those cosmetic things, the fit and finish things, this is not a bad buy in terms of the price. And before you go down to the comments and go, what do you mean that's not a bad buy? It's so expensive. It's ridiculously overpriced. Go look at the price of flight controllers and ESCs. If you haven't bought them in the last 4 to 6 months, what used to be an $80 FC and ESC stack is now $130 FC and ESC. Everything is more expensive, and you may need to recalibrate before you decide this is a bad deal. But if you have the ability to get stuff at prices from 6 months ago, then snap it up, because it's not going to last. If you decide that you'd like to buy some of the products in this video, there are links in the video description down below, and they are affiliate links. And what that means is that you click that link, you do your shopping at the store, you check out of the store, and then I get a little commission. So if I've helped you make a buying decision into one of these, click the link, go buy one of these. If you want to buy anything else, just go to the affiliated store, click the link, go to the store, shop. It's an easy way to support the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, just a mouse click. What do you think? Would you pay $30 more? Let's assume that they flew the same. Would you pay $30 more for the fit and finish on the Evoque compared to the Diatone Roma F5 V2? I'd be interested to hear which of these. I bet it's going to be polarizing, and people are going to feel really strongly that one or the other is the best. I'd like to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And that's going to do it for the video. Yeah. Happy flying. Hey there, it's me, end of the episode, Joshua. This is the... What are you doing? Hey there, it's me, end of the episode, Joshua. I'm just out here taking a walk with my dog. If this is the first time we've met, nice to see you. And if this is the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 17th time we've met, you sure seem to like my content. So I hope you're subscribed. And maybe you could think about joining my Patreon, where you can support me for a couple dollars a month and help buy dog food for Mamba here. He's not named after a flight controller. He had that name when we got him, but it sure is a nice coincidence. Oh, here's some videos I thought you might like. Anything to say to the people, Mamba?